We're live.
Yeah.
Hey, everyone. It's great to have you here with us if you're joining live. We are really excited for this conversation. We have brought our friend Dr. Kelly Flanagan back. He was a past guest on Sacred Business Stories, and we enjoyed the conversation so much that we wanted to bring him back specifically to talk about his book that he has coming out in March. Is that right? It's
That's right.
March, right?
March 3rd.
Yes. Yeah. So for those of you that aren't familiar, don't know Dr. Kelly Flanagan, he's a clinical psychologist, author, coach. He's been featured in all sorts of cool places like the Five Love Languages, Today's Show. And yeah, he has this book coming out in March. It's called The Road Less Triggered. And as I understand it, it's all about kind of understanding what leads to emotional reactions and learning really how to work with that. So as he says, you can move from protection mode into connection mode. So yeah, we're super happy to have you here with us today.
It's good to be here. I'm going to try to put in my AirPods. So what's funny
Yeah.
about this? Well, so it's MLK Day here in the States, right? Which means, oh wait, my kids are home, my wife's home, and so they're all texting over your face right now about all the things they're about to do in the basement nearby. So I'm going to put on headphones and we'll see if that can give it. Does it
Cool.
work? Can you hear me? Okay.
It's
Yeah,
perfect. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So it's really good to be here and ignore anything. Well, I guess you probably can't see it over here. Let's all ignore what happens over there.
It's all good. Well, I'm very excited to have this conversation with you. And I just love how your topic connects to our audience as well. And even though you're talking a lot about relationship, you talk a lot about, and I would love to see, to hear from you, like how you're touching on that in this new book about open heart, right? And we actually help people to create business from their hearts. So, but what happens very often is like we do have something that we hold very close to our heart and like building a business. But for many other reasons that has nothing to do with business, we keep our heart closed, right? And without actually knowing that like it's affecting every area of our lives, we try to jump into like building a business from a heart that is already like hurt, or from a heart that's like, I'm craving to open, I'm screaming to open, but I'm just so protected. So I would love to hear a little more on that and just relating to this, because you also talk a lot about connection, right? And one of our themes is like everything is connected. So if your heart is closed on your relationships with your wife, with your kids, with your friends, like we close our heart for many different reasons. It's going to be very hard for you to actually create a business from your heart. So I would love to hear your perspective on that.
As always, great jumping off point. I love it. So yeah, one of the central ideas that has emerged for me in recent years is that connection doesn't break down between people; it breaks down within people. And it breaks down in that moment when we're triggered to shift from connection mode into protection mode, or to put it in the language of the heart, for our heart to close, to go from open-hearted to closed-hearted. And when, one of the toughest places to be in life, which I think is where most of us are most of the time, is wanting to connect while we're in protection mode. It's a sort of self-sabotage and even relationship sabotage that we don't know we're doing. And we sort of get caught in this grind of trying to connect, and really the impulse is to protect the moment. And so this book is about helping people learn how to stay in connection mode, how to keep that heart open in those really key moments when they're asking for connection, trying to cultivate connection in their relationships. And to your point, when we're in connection mode, we have access to all of our higher powers, to our capacity for creativity, joy, communication, connection, empathy, compassion, patience, forgiveness. All of those connective capacities are present when our heart is open. We have access to them. When we close off and we switch into protection mode, we lose access to all that wisdom and capacity. And so this is a book about, in that key moment when you need those abilities the most, how do you maintain your access to them? whether you're building a business or whether you're having a conversation with your teenager, and everything in between.
Yeah, like it's I just want to share with people that we are giving I see you, Phil, writing here that we are giving 10 copies. So if you just want to speak to that. And I think we need to keep reminding people, because as people join, they won't see, they won't know. So if you just want to share, Phil.
Yeah, just real quick. Yeah, just thank you for being here. We would love to make this interactive. So if you have questions for Dr. Kelly, please put those in the chat as well. And we have 10 copies of this book. Is US only, or is it US and Canada, Dr. Kelly?
I believe it's US only.
US only. So sadly, we can only do US. But if you are in the US, please, if you restack this first 10, we're going to send you a physical copy. So we would love to get that into your hands as well. So yes, that's our message for you right now.
Yeah, and thanks to anybody who shares it in advance. Appreciate you guys.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So just back to your point, and like how hard, like I think this is a topic that we all, like I would say, like at least people around me, like we love talking about, and like how do we keep our heart open?
Yeah.
But in the minute that you're triggered, it's so hard to remember. Like we know, it's one of the topics that like we know a lot about it, but then actually doing it is the challenge. So like how do we remember ourselves in that moment?
Well, the first thing you definitely want to do is you want to get a copy of The Road Less Triggered, because that's entirely what it's about. It is not a book about inspiration or high-minded ideals. It's a practical, actionable book that walks you through the process of staying open in those moments where you're most likely to close. And it's information. It's a learning that I've gone through both personally and professionally. I personally got to the end of 2020, COVID year. I think we all remember that year. I got into the end of 2020. Spent most of that year triggered. I blew up my business partnership that year. Blew up the best friendship with that business partner. Triggered at home frequently. Got so triggered one afternoon that I got frustrated and went on a bike ride and wasn't paying much attention. Went over the handlebars of bone in two places. It didn't heal properly, so it was a long, painful recovery. And I got to New Year's Eve going into 2021, and I was literally looking up fitness resolutions, like how am I going to get this body in shape next year? And I came across a quote from Michael Singer's book, The Untethered Soul, which is, "Do not let anything in life be important enough that you're willing to close your heart over it." And like, it hit me harder than the asphalt road it hit me. That's what my 2021 needs to be about. So I made a New Year's resolution going into 21, just moment to moment, will notice my heart closing and try to. I was wise enough to put the word in try from the start, because it's exceptionally difficult to do. I mean, that's what I learned in the first few weeks of 2021, is even though I knew I wanted to do it and I was setting the intention of doing it, the actual acting out of being able to stay open-hearted is exceptionally difficult. And unfortunately, The Untethered Soul wasn't a place you could go to get help with it, because Michael Singer, he has his refrain, relax and release, that he says over and over again. I was like,
drives me nuts.
Oh man, I know two people who traveled all the way to his ashram in Florida to say, "Hey, Mickey, like how do you actually keep your heart open?" And both times he looked at these guys and just said, "You just do it."
Yeah, I don't remember if I told you that, but I'm add a third to the list. I've been there. Well, I spent week. So for about a year, when it was right around the time of COVID, I was living in Florida, and I found out about the temple, and I'd been following his work for a long time. So I went out there week after week for about, I don't know, 6 months to a year, somewhere in that window. I was going out there almost every weekend and would sit with him and his group out there at the ashram. And it was a beautiful experience. I've also probably listened to probably 60 hours plus of his audio tapes. And yeah, he would drive me a little bit batty, because I've had that same experience. You talk to him and he just keeps kind of describing it, but you're like, but how? And so yeah, it was.
I think of him with open heartedness. I think of him like sort of like a math savant, and the calculus comes so naturally to him. He can't really teach the rest.
It's like unconscious. It's like unconscious competence, right?
It's habit, a conscious competence. Exactly it. So I I realized early in 21 that if there was going to be a curriculum for open-heartedness, like a method for turning triggers into togetherness, I was going to have to be the one who sort of created it, at least for myself. And so that's what I've been up to the last 5 years. And so the book lays out the process. It's a 3-part process with 9 steps. And the first part, get calm. And so it is first and foremost about taking responsibility for your nervous system reaction, and learning how to self-regulate, learning how to calm yourself before you connect yourself. We usually get it backwards, to connect before we get calm. And so it's a process of learning how to get your nervous system regulated before you try to relate to anybody. And the first step for me that became so essential was starting to use my bodily signals as an exceptionally early warning sign about to close my heart. That's key to me to this process, is starting to get familiar with the fingerprint of your heart closing in your body, like what it feels like, and starting to be able to see it coming before it even happens gives you much more freedom of choice about what to do in that next moment. So that's a big part of it for me.
Is that what would like? I love your the subtitle, like turning conflict into connection with a single choice. Is
That's right.
that connected to this single choice? Like that's the first thing that you got to do it to actually be able to walk down this road.
Yeah, the single choice is the choice to stay open hearted. But one of the things we accomplish really early on in the book is the awareness that it is a choice. Typically, when it sort of feels, because it happens so fast, so quickly and unconsciously, that moment of choice, that it feels like someone does X, Y, and Z, and your heart automatically closes, and then they do A, B, and C, and but really there is a very narrow window of choice in which we're choosing to let it close or we're choosing to let it open. And what I discovered early in 21 was that window just passed. And my heart was already closed before I'd even noticed it. So the goal is to expand the window. That's the first thing you got to do. Expand that window in which you're conscious of your choice. And I share in the book, I share some research that shows if you pay attention to your thoughts and your behaviors versus your body will give you 80% earlier warning that your heart's about to close than your thoughts or your behaviors. So in that first step in the book, we talk about drawing upon your totally underutilized sixth sense called interoception to tune into your body and let that give you an 80% earlier warning that you're about to close. And interoception sounds scientific and wonky, but you use it all the time. Like if I ask someone who's listening right now, how badly do you have to go to the bathroom? Right? They're like 10 out of 10. You just use interoception. It's wild, actually, when you think about it. Like your consciousness traveled down to an organ in your body, did an assessment, came back up, reported out, and you can use that superpower. You can harness it to give yourself an 80% bigger window to decide, do I want to let this closing continue or do I want to do something different in this moment?
Yeah, I like going a little deeper on this topic, and I maybe you do talk about it in your book. Do you believe that we have choice 100% of the time to keep our heart open?
Mm. I think it was Lama Rod Owen said, we always have a choice, but it takes work to get to the back. You know, Would I say right now, I feel 5 years down the road, like I have a choice in every moment? There's some situations, some triggers that sort of activate me. So it still feels like it to me. But that's the journey. To be able to say, years later, 90% of the situations that used to feel like they were happening to me now have a sense of agency in. I get to make decisions about that. You know, one just this weekend, 5 years ago, it would have been a 1 to 2 week probably conflict. And the thing happened that always happens. And I noticed myself having the bodily reaction first. And then I followed through on the prop. And we were able to go through that But I wouldn't even call it a rupture. We were able to go through that conversation in the space of minutes, instead of it being 1 to 2 weeks. You're now having to recover from for another 1 to 2 weeks just to get back to square one, right? So to me, that's the possibility here. Taking back your time and your sense of safety with other people and them with you, just disrupting more and more of these moments where we get triggered and it sort of takes off with us.
It's beautiful. And I remember, and I know you've touched on this a little bit already, but I know there's been new folks joining us. I think I remember when you came on to Sacred Business Stories, I love the name. You call it the peaceful pivot process. Is this the name of the actual process?
Yeah.
And yeah, so like, I know we don't have time to kind of walk through the whole thing, and you've touched on parts of it kind of through this conversation so far, but yeah, maybe just kind of taking people through high level, whatever makes sense. Yeah, broader view.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So it has 3 parts. The first part we've already talked a little bit about, get calm. And in that part, the steps are sense your conflict coming using your body. So give yourself more a window to notice what's about to happen. Then step 2 is disrupt your defensiveness. What I've discovered is that if that doesn't happen, right, if you get off to the races in terms of acting out on defensive behavior, it's almost impossible to turn it around. And in the whole thing, whether somebody leaves or whatever. So disrupt your defensiveness, which includes holding in awareness your defensive urges rather than we say watch them instead of wielding them. And by the way, Michael Singer's teachings are applicable here too, because he says if you want to know why you do something, don't do it and watch what happens inside of you. So this is an incredibly important part of the process. I'm seeing it coming. Oh wow, now I'm watching all the things I want to do and I'm not going to do them. And you'll discover that your nervous system actually ramps up more at first. Mm-hmm. Because all those defensive things were the things you were doing to sort of kind of help it down, even though it doesn't ever work long term. They were like the short term solutions. I'm going to put myself down by doing this, even though it's going to create lots of conflict and chaos. But now we saw it coming, we disrupted our defenses, and now got to do it gets us calm. The defensive thing that's going to create more disruption over time. So that's step 3 is cultivating calmness before connectedness. The second 2 parts of the process, and in the visual framework that I include in the book, a little path that leads from this moment of calm that you've actually created for yourself right back into connection, because that's what a lot of us will want to do at that moment. Again, now let me go get connected with my people. And I put that path there in the framework. I say it's a lot like the paths at the quad at the U of I, to school. If you look at them from above, they're not symmetrical. They're pretty random. And that's because the engineers had the foresight to not put down sidewalks at first, but just to let students walk wherever they'll walk. And then they put in sidewalks at the top of them. Put this path in the framework because we're all going to do it over and over again. We're going to be tempted to go, okay, I'm calm. Now let me get back into that conversation. If you do that, that's fine. You may have to learn the hard way that it's not going to work. In the long term, you're going to end up right back triggered. And you have to calm yourself all over again. So the second part of the process, which is a little bit of a longer path back to connection, but more sustainable in the long run, is what I call getting free. Getting free of the emotional patterns that are underpinning your reaction. Includes getting familiar with what's going on inside of you. What's hurting in that moment where you're starting to get triggered? What's the story of that hurt throughout your life? And how can you learn to feel it instead of defending it? So as soon as you can feel something, you don't have to defend it. You don't have to prevent it. And then once you can do that, you're going to be able to show up. Guarantee it. The one guarantee I can make is once you can do that, you will be able to show up with a far more resilient, open heart to your relationships than you ever had before. And that's where part 3, getting connected, comes in. Okay, now I've learned how to do that. Now I start to show up. Now I start to express myself. Now, in the middle of these triggering moments, I can stay curious rather than critical. Now, learn how to give myself compassion so I can express compassion towards you when you're triggered. And things just get really exciting in that The connection starts to come more naturally rather than feeling like you're always white knuckling it. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Yeah, it's yeah, I'm so curious. I can't wait to read this book because it's so I can see myself in so many parts of that process. But yeah, definitely the two that hooked me is like that moment. And it's interesting. I've gotten way better at this, but that moment where you can see it, like you have the awareness. And I don't know if you've touched on this or not, but like you have the awareness, but then it's like you've got that well-worn groove, and it's like you still bite the hook and take it. It's like you're sitting there. It's like you can see the choice, and you're like, I know where this is gonna lead me, and here we go. And so
That's it.
there's that one, and then kind of the one where you said, I forget exactly how you just said it, but basically where
Yeah.
you kind of are able to pull out of it, but then not jumping back in. And I've had that experience too, where it's like I catch it the first time, I make the wise choice not to bite the hook, and then after some amount of dialogue, it's like no, 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 I got to
Yes,
go back in for more of that drug. And so yeah, I can
exactly.
see myself in all of that.
Yeah, I think both of those moments, like that first one is that moment between step 1 and 2 where you see your heart closing, and then you can see your defensive urges starting to rise up, and there's so much gravitational force.
Hmm.
That's where a lot of that work comes in early on. Okay, yeah, we can all relate to that. Even in my faith tradition, the Apostle Paul said, I do the things I don't want to do, and I don't do the things I do want to do. And he's describing that moment of like,
Mm.
I don't want to get pulled into this pattern again, and yet I'm pulled in. And then the second one, that second moment you described between step 3 and 4, where you're tempted to jump right back into connection. Or a lot of us are also tempted to go, well, I'm calm now. It's sort of over. Just not think about this anymore.
Mm.
And we don't take that extra intentional effort to explore what was going on. But just get ourselves caught. Yeah, that second piece of really beginning to examine the emotional pattern in you that was happening in that moment is a really important piece.
Mm. Mhm.
Yeah, as I reflect for myself, I connect a lot what Phil just shared, and for me, like I think when I choose to go where I know I don't want to go, is because I like to feel I'm right. So like the feeling of feeling right feels so good that I'm like, I'm gonna get into this trigger and I'm gonna react because then I can prove my point, and then feeling right is so good, you know.
Oh, Phil, yes, I'm quite aware. And my wife would also agree with you that I love to feel right. Um, and there's so many different, like, different facets of feeling right. There's like, there's when like when someone says to you, I could tell you didn't really want to be there, but you wanted to be there. That is painful. That's frustrating.
Mm.
That is, it can almost feel like that. It's an overused term now, but it can feel like gaslighting to tell me how I'm doing in here. And so to be right feels almost like honor oneself in that sense, right? Like that can be a really tempting conversation to get into. Another one that, just generally speaking, when people have the wrong impression of you, to
Mm.
pause
Yes.
and let them have the wrong impression about you is sometimes absolutely excruciating. You feel that being right is also getting them to see who and what I really got me wrong. So yeah, these are incredibly difficult urges to sort of suppress in that moment, which is why we try to create that powerful pause to give you some space to do it.
Mhm. Go ahead, Carolina.
That was just, yeah, no, I think it's so relevant, this topic, and I just love the way you approach, and also like it's a relationship, so we have two pieces, right? Let's say if we're talking about like a loving relationship, so it's already like two elements to that thing, or to that connection. But I would love for you to talk a little more, because the way you teach is so empowering that
Mhm.
almost feels to me that I do not depend on my partner to walk
Mhm.
this less triggered road. Like I can just
Mhm.
start, I don't depend on the other person or the other element. And I can actually choose to, because if always depends, like maybe we can have a conversation about it, or
Yeah.
maybe I could just choose to walk the path. And that's kind of like the way I'm seeing the less triggered road for myself, independently of how others will perceive this, or if they desire to embark on that journey with me or not. Am I
Yes.
right on that?
No, I think you're right on. And the part of us that in that moment feels compelled to try to change the other person, that part of us will feel deep sense of injustice.
Mm.
But the wisest part of us that knows that we can only control ourselves, we are only responsible for our own, will be deeply empowered by this process because it is change you can actually be in charge of, taking responsibility for how you show up to the interaction. Now, the promise of that, which I, I sometimes hesitate to offer early on in a conversation about this, because the other sort of clever part of you will be like, oh, just take responsibility for myself. And there's rewards on the other end, which isn't really taking responsibility for yourself. It's trying to get something out of it. But I do think it's important to name the promises. Number one, if you're part of a pattern and you change, the pattern change.
Mm.
And so it is not as if you aren't having an impact on the situation, on people, on the family systems theory. We know when one part of a system changes, what will happen is all the other parts will at first resist that change, and then they will begin to adapt and change themselves, accommodate that change. But getting through that initial resistance is huge. But yes, taking responsibility, owning our part of the pattern, and the pattern will inevitably change if we can stay consistent with that. Number one. Number two, mm, this is a story I share in the book. I'll share it here. A year, or exactly a year after I had a delusion, right, moment to moment, I noticed my heart closing and try to open it back up. We had just gotten back from a Christmas vacation trip to Mexico. It was like another COVID Christmas. We weren't even sure if we were going to have it. Dot a dot. And, I'm typically a pretty easily stressed and triggered traveler. Like, I don't travel well, and this was not an easy trip. I mean, like, we ran into like jeeps with machine guns in Mexico, and we're trying to get back in during COVID. So like people are like basically extorting us for cash just to get into the country again. And so we're sitting there a year later. It's New Year's Eve now. We've just gotten back from Mexico, and we're sitting there as a family deciding like what's our intentions going to be for the year. What is our be as a family? And my wife said, "Hey, why don't you tell the kids about what you've been practicing this year? Open-heartedness." Shared with them, not about today. It wasn't yet, but the gist of what I was working on. And my daughter, she's like, at the time, I think, she looked at me. She said, "That must be why every time on the way to Mexico when something went wrong, I looked at you and I felt."
Mm.
And I realized in that moment that the practice of open heartedness, it wasn't just changing me, it was changing even the people around me when they didn't doing it. Hit me that, a soothed nervous system soothes nervous systems. Soul calms souls, an open heart, open heart. And we don't do it for that reason, because that would be trying to control others through our own personal growth, but it is often the inevitable result. These days, what I'll tell people is, you are the environment in which your people live and move and exist. And if the environment is calmer and safer, that is going to influence how they show up into that environment. So that's a long way to say, yes, this is about empowering oneself to change what you can. But the promises for how that impacts, your place and your people is just huge.
Yeah, it's the beautiful invisible language of the heart, right?
You got it.
Like
You
you're
got
just
it.
feeling it, and then everything is being transformed without a single word. I just find so beautiful, like your work, and so like worth sharing, because in a way I think that's going back to the choice. Like I asked you the question for curiosity, but I also asked myself, like, do I believe that I have 100% of the time, like, the choice to choose? And I believe the answer is like, yes, 100% of the time I would have that. It doesn't mean that I always, like right now where I am, I know that I not always can choose that. But from before, like I didn't believe that there was a possibility, but it began with the belief that like, what if I could always choose my heart? What if I could always choose to stay with like, in this open state and connection and kind of like holding hands instead of it's me against you, right?
Right.
That sometimes doesn't always have access to that. But I think that that's the walk, and maybe that's why you chose the title Road, because it never ends.
Um, that yes, and to your point, I would encourage folks that the temptation is to think immediately of the highest conflict, most frustrating, most challenging relational or situational thing in your life to change, to keep your heart open to, and then to sort of think about how do I apply this to that. I had my driver's ed teacher in high school. He started off every semester by saying to the new students, "When I'm done with you, you're going to be able to drive on LSD." What he meant was Lakeshore Drive in Chicago, but he got our attention with that. But we didn't start on LSD. We started in an empty parking lot at the local community college, which is, and so my encouragement as people are starting to read the book and take up the process is to start in the empty parking lots of your life. Right? And Michael Singer talks a little bit about this too. He brought him like, here you go. It's MLK Day, and my son, who's 18 years old, he's only got about 5 more months with his school friends before they all start to go separate ways. And they were all planning to go skiing today and have an amazing experience together. And here in Chicago, it's a wind chill of -15. So, hearts immediately close to that. We start to resist the weather. We start to resist traffic jam. We start to resist. I mean, over Christmas, here's a good example. Over Christmas this year, my son, same 18-year-old, he tested positive for COVID. Here we are again, 5 years later, tested positive for COVID on Christmas Day, so we had to cancel our family gathering. My heart closed to that initially. I did not want that to happen. It was not according to my preference. And then it happened again on New Year's. My wife tested positive, so we had to cancel our friends gathering for New Year's. And I just kept thinking, I feel a little of emotion at this. I kept thinking, I can't keep my heart to these disappointments. How am I going to handle the really big ones? How am I going to handle the really challenging moments in relationships? And so these disappointments over the holidays immediately became opportunities to practice heartedness, as training ground for that thing that's really going to be hard, that thing that's really going to be difficult. So those little empty parking lot moments and opportunities, they're presenting themselves all the time. Don't feel like you have to get right on LSD. learn how to drive in the parking lot of parking lot of open-heartedness, and you'll grow in that capacity for other situations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. So I have a question kind of related to that, but and I'm curious about this on 2 levels. One, as someone who's very much looking forward to reading the book, but 2, we're actually kind of embarking on our own journey of writing a book this year. And you share about how this book is kind of structured. And I'm curious about the structure. It sounds like it's kind of more action oriented, or you provide some level of exercises that people can use so they're not just like intellectualizing this. So I'm just curious if you could kind of describe that process and how you're hoping the readers will engage with this.
I appreciate that question. Not many people ask about that, and it's one of my favorite things to talk about with the book. So the book is built around the process, 3 parts and 9 total steps. The book has 3 parts, and each chapter is dedicated to us. But I also I work on this with people all the time. We've developed sets of incredibly helpful and supportive exercises to do in association with each step. And my question with the book is like, I really want to share those exercises in a meaningful way. I don't know about you guys, but like you get to the end of a chapter in a book and it's, and then you get to the little box cutout that has the exercise and you're like, you read two lines of the dry, description and you're like, all right, next thing. It's like, could I do this? And some people who are listening might know I uh, delved into fiction writing here in the last few years. I've written a novel. What if I create a couple, two characters who I walk through this entire peaceful pivot? And at the end of each chapter, it's the narrative about a session we have together on Zoom in which we go through the exercise that's associated with that. And it was incredibly fun to write. And I think it makes the practical part of the really practical exercise part of this book incredibly fun to read. I was very gratified when my wife was reading chapter 6 and reading the exercise in chapter 6, and she was crying. I was like, okay, I won this. This worked. And I want to be clear too, even though it's a married couple, I think at least half of the sessions are with one of them individually. One of the sessions is focused on the wife and her relationship with her mother. One of the sessions is focused on the husband and his relationship with his son. So it doesn't feel like a sort of a marital case study. It feels like a case study of two people who are learning to be less triggered and stay open-hearted. So I'm really excited for people to even read the exercises in the book.
That's fun. That's fun. Yeah, I don't think I've seen a book structured that way. So I'll be curious. Maybe I'll get some creative inspiration myself. That's awesome.
That'd be awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm also curious about. Yeah, you mentioned, well, the origins of this going back to kind of COVID and, kind of has this book been 5 years in the making, or like what was that? And I'm curious about this, my own creative process too. Like when was the moment, and I know you've written past books, like when was the moment that you knew that like this was the thing, and kind of if you're able to kind of connect us with what that meant for you, or, how that kind of came to be from a creative process perspective.
Great question. It's not even something I've thought about. Great question. So I would say, it really did start as a New Year's resolution. Most of those are, thrown by the wayside by the end of January. For me, I was still practicing it daily in the summer of 2021, and it was starting to change my life. It was starting to change the trajectory of my business, certainly changing the trajectory of my relationship. So this by about mid-year, I knew that I'd stumbled upon the Apostle Paul again says pray without ceasing. I'd sort of discovered my way of ceasing, which is aware moment to moment if my heart's closed. And so by about mid-year 21, I knew that. By fall of 2022, I hosted a retreat, a companion camp for you ranch in out of Park City, Utah. We're going to be hosting the Relational Intelligence Summit there this June. That retreat, the sort of headline for the retreat was "Master Your Most Important Moment." And so by 2022, I was starting to bring these ideas in the context of speaking events and retreats to people, and starting to see is this as universal as I think it is? Because it seems to be, but I don't know for sure. My wife will often be like, "No, that's just you." This one was. It seemed, and the more I talked to people about it, it was universal. And so then we started to work diligently on the book, the manuscript, in about fall 2023. And then starting at the beginning of end of 24 into 25, not only was I finishing the manuscript, but I was bringing each chapter to my online community here on Substack, the Less Triggered Tribe, in our monthly calls. And I was working through the content with them, and they were telling me what was working and what wasn't, and translating and what was too complicated. And so I have a great debt of gratitude to them as well for their feedback. But most of 2025 was getting the manuscript locked into place and finished and, off to a printer stuff.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I'm curious. That's so fascinating because Carolina is actually writing something I think for Thursday about this idea of building in public. So it sounds like that was a big part of your process in a way.
It was part of my reason for coming over to Substack. It was I wanted to, yeah, I wanted to build in public and to crowdsource the wisdom and feedback of a community to make sure that it wasn't, that there were no blind spots in the. Um, I don't know. I mean, this is my fourth book. I don't think I've ever published a book where I've so many eyes on it and smart eyes. There's a blind spot. I'll be curious to see as it reaches a wider audience what feedback we receive. But I think the process is about as solid as it can be.
Yeah. Like,
And you're
what
going
is
to build in
your
public this year. You're going to build in public this year. Is that
We're
what I
still
heard?
figuring it out. I mean, we might need to get some tips from you. We're still trying to figure out the process that we want to go. It's been this whole idea was on our list all of last year, but we were intentionally holding it because there were other aspects that we needed to have in place for sustainability. And now we feel we have the space to do it. And so we declared it publicly, like actually earlier this week. And we're early in the process. We got lots of ideas for kicking, but we're like little toddlers at this whole game, so we're not exactly sure what we're doing yet.
My Substack is on its third iteration. Its name even since early 2023, and that reflected how much my understanding of what this thing was over the course of the huge step you guys are taking, and it'll evolve tremendously, I'm sure. But it's exciting. It's exciting to
Yeah.
announce that you created an inciting incident for yourself you can't go backward from now.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. I love to engineer those
Yeah.
moments, whether it's a product or a book. And I mean, that's been our experience for the last, this business. We're 2 years in, and with our framework and everything we've created with the Harmony Map, it's been evolving. It's been a process of evolution for 2 years, and we've had thousands of people go through it now. And so all of that feedback and all the conversations, I feel like there's so much richness here that we're looking to bring to it. But it's a whole new way. It's something we've never embarked on before, so we're really excited about it. So it's always good to hear tips from someone like you who's been doing this for a while.
For you guys.
So I know Carolina, and I know we're getting up on time here. I know you had a couple questions, Carolina, about that before we close this. Was there anything else on your list? Yeah.
Well, I have a lot of things that I could stay talking to you here for like 5 hours, but we don't have 5 hours. I would love to hear from you. Like, what is your biggest hope by like launching this book? Because I feel that when you launch a book, like your message goes to places that you alone might not be able to take it, right? It like amplifies. And what is your hope that how this message and the practices that you're sharing like will help people?
My hope would be that by the time a reader is done with the first chapter of the book, the introduction, that they've got a new lens that they're looking at in the world through that they can't take off. That alone, even before you get into the actual, be transformational to the people to be walking around life and going, oh, I have clothes there. And oh, I said good morning to my daughter, and she sort of rolled her eyes at me, and I have clothes there, and just to start to like the opportunities for transformation are just everywhere, and so to start to get to see that within our community. I can't tell you we just did a monthly community call where they came back from the holidays and said I was able to keep my heart open in that situation where I never was before, and this is what happened as a result of it. So I'm frankly excited to hear the stories of people who recognize the moment and make the choice and get to watch the beautiful things that happen from there. I mean, if I tap into my ambitious side, I want to see this book get into the hands of as many people as possible. I think that our big human experiment is sort of at a critical point. And you might say we're at the point where we're needing to learn how to shift from survival mode. Right? The biological imperative to be in fight or flight all the time we're going to have to sort of take responsibility for it and start to show up with an open heart in order for us to sort of like this tipping point. So if this book could get into as many hands as possible and become a part of that human conversation we're having right now about how to do that, it'd be wild. And I would feel grateful that I got to contribute to it.
I'm going to share that I hold the same desire as you, and I'm holding the space for this book to just reach as many people as possible, because I truly, truly believe that if there is one answer to how we're going to build the world that we want to build, is through accessing our heart. And we don't depend on the politics to do that. We don't depend on other people. We do not depend on the circumstances. We do not depend on the weather. It's just like a personal choice that we need to keep making, like moment by moment, like just the way you teach. And I think you speak to that in a very, very beautiful way. And I don't think that we can keep going surviving. We are not meant to be surviving here. We're meant to be thriving.
And and we know this, like the longest longitudinal experiment in human history out of Harvard has shown definitively that above and beyond every other factor, our sense of togetherness with our people determines our happiness. And the thing I would want people to know is that, how many times we've ended up more together as a result of being triggered? Like in all of human history, in the zero. It's happened 0 times. Right? So we're going to have to learn what to do with our triggers so we can end up more together, so we can experience the fruits of being human, which is our togetherness with each other. I'm excited for people to start to focus on that.
Yeah, I just want to share a quick story with you, because I think it happened at the end of the year, and I connected with like my ability to keep my heart open. We had some plans for Christmas and New Year's, and then my dog ended up sick, and we had to cancel everything. And I was going to see my parents, and I also noticed, I'm like, oh, my heart is closed. And then I chose to keep my heart. I'm like, can I just keep my heart open in this? It was like last minute for New Year's. You don't find anything available. We were just here in this town that we don't have anybody around us. And we ended up creating, but I chose, and I guess Phil as well, like chose to stay open. And like, what is the gift from choosing to stay with the heart open? And we had the most beautiful experience going to a beach here and then going to a farm. And we just learned that the place that we were planning on going was like crazy rains, storm, traffic all over the place. And I just want to share, because sometimes we think we know and we get upset, and then we choose to close our heart, like thinking that we know better. And then my dad was like, thank God you did not come, because it was just like the messiest time ever. And we ended up like in a gorgeous place with a beautiful situation last minute that we couldn't like plan ahead of time. So choosing to stay with the heart open actually gave us like unexpected experience that I don't think we could have like planned with the head,
100%. And that's what like and to give ourselves the grace that our minds are designed to solve for the best possible situation for it. And so when our minds think they have solved for the best possible situation, then it's taken away. We're like, oh no, like this is a disaster. We need to come up with more solutions. Open your heart to what was and just fully engage with all of your presence and wisdom with the way things were. And then you end up in a better situation. Totally resonate.
Yeah, and I can say that I don't think there is ever a time that I chose to open my heart and I regret it or I got it wrong. 100% of the time when I chose to open my heart, even when I was facing fear and I was, afraid of the outcome, always, always, always worked like better than what I could have planned. So just to say like how much I love your work and how much I find relevant this conversation.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. So, it's interesting. You said your hope for this book is kind of this awareness, and I think there's an opportunity here today on this live. So anyone that's still with us or might catch this replay later. So if anyone's been listening and they do have this desire to kind of level up in their relationships and their growth, what is something they could be doing even while they wait for to get the book, like something they could be doing today in the next 5 minutes, even if they're confronted with the situation.
A great question. Well, first of all, as you said, restack this post. That'll get you in line for a free copy, and you'll only have a few weeks to wait. Another thing that they can do is we knew that when people started to hear the message of this book, they'd want to dive into it, but you got to wait till March 3rd. So if you go to roadlesstriggered.com, and you order one copy of the book and you enter your order number on that page, you're going to get that first chapter downloaded right away. So you'll immediately get to put on the new lens. I think that would be huge. You also get a 90-minute masterclass. It sort of covers the entire process, and it's super helpful, I'm told. And then you get a chance to join the launch team as well as to join our community for 6 months for free. So all sorts of opportunities that you can get right away by ordering the book today and putting your order number in there. As far as like art from book, sort of book related things, the very first, I would just start with that first step, which is starting to use your interoception to get familiar with how your nervous system activates in your body when you are starting to get triggered and when your heart's starting to close. And it's really interesting. Like, people have unique fingerprints. But I've learned, like, one person will say, I feel it right here. I'll say in the center of your chest, and they'll say, no, it's actually a little bit more to the left. Right? Another person is to the right. Another person, it's actually way down here in the sternum, right? Some people, it's the gut. What I do tell people is it's always somewhere between your waist and your temples. No one has ever said my heart started to close and my toes cramped. That's never been said in human history either. So the first thing to do is to start to tune into your body from your waist to your temples and start to get really familiar with that. One of the exercises in the book, we call it the See It Sooner self-inventory, which is when you're at a 10, heart wide open, what does it feel like in your body? Does it feel like in your thoughts? What sorts of things do you do? Start to journal about that. And you're at a 7, heart's starting to close, but it's still mostly open. Your body feel like in those moments? Like, actually begin to bring awareness to your heart at those different levels of openness and closeness. Because what will happen pretty quickly when you start to make a practice of that, you're going to be in a conversation with somebody, and you're going to have the thought, oh my gosh, I was from a 9 to a 6. What's going on here? Right? And now all of a sudden, the first question is about what's going on inside of you rather than a reaction toward them. And you're on an entirely way. So that would be the first thing I'd encourage people to do.
That's a very powerful practice. Thanks for sharing.
You bet.
Cool. Well, I think we're at the top of the hour here. Sounds like you covered a lot of really cool ways people can engage with the book and get a lot of value even now as they're waiting for the release. Where they can find you here on Substack if they just want to follow your work a little bit closer. That's you remind us what the link is for that as well, and we'll make sure it gets into the replay.
There's the link. Right, Dr. Kelly Flanagan at .substack.com. Is that how it goes? I think it goes name first, right?
It's Substack, yeah.
And then Substack, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so Dr. Kelly Flanagan .substack.com. Yeah, and the post right now that's pinned at the top of the page takes you right to where you can go and get all.
Cool. And we'll fact check you in case we need to on that link.
Yes,
We'll make sure all the right links get into the recap. So yes, thank you so much for your time and being generous with sharing everything you have with our groups, not once, but twice. Yeah, it's been really our honor to have you with us, and we're excited to see how this all unfolds and to continue to follow your book journey here.
Listen, there's such a synchronicity here. I'll have as many conversations with you as you invite. Keep doing it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Cool.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited to get the book too. So maybe we have a conversation after we read the book.
Sounds good. We'll do a debrief. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. I could figure out how to end. There we are.